The NFL draft is over. Day 3 is in the books, and we got you covered here on Fantasy Football today. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings joining us as a special guest. A very tired, a very busy Chris Trapasso breaking down the NFL draft on CBSSports.com with the grades. Fantastic job as always, Chris, and we're looking forward to your insight on some of these players that we probably don't know as well as you do for sure, because you've been studying these guys for months and months and months, and the grades have been fantastic on the site. So please check them out because Chris has done a fantastic job throughout all of our draft coverage on CBS. Heath's going to have a lot of Dynasty coverage, I'm sure, coming up. We're going to get our rankings on the site very soon. So we're going to have you from a fantasy covered from a fantasy perspective, but we're going to talk about some of the picks in rounds 4, round 5, round 6, and maybe even round 7 as we look at what was a busy Saturday afternoon. So, Chris, I guess I'll ask you this first, just as somebody who's been studying this. Is there a rookie that was taken on day 3 that stands out to you, skill position-wise, obviously, wide receiver, running back, tight end, maybe quarterback, Spencer Rattler, for example. Anybody that stands out with a landing spot that you're just like, man, I love this player in this spot?
You're talking day 3 only, or
Day
just the entire day 3 only?
I know you're a big Javon Baker guy, for example, so he goes to the Patriots. I know you were
for sure. Let's see. I'm trying to look here. I'm trying
Kimani
to look.
Vidal, for example. I know you're a big fan of his. Also.
Yes, I think him going 181, 6th round. It seems like he could have been picked earlier to be stocky like he is, like 5'8", 5'9", 220, and was the bell cow at Troy. And what I like to do with running backs is kind of categorize them. Are they slashers? Are they those zone stretch play runners that just make one cut, put their foot in the ground, get upfield? Or are they those multi-cut runners that can kind of be side-to-side wiggle, make a linebacker miss in space? With Vidal, you get that like both rushing styles, that he blends them together very well. We know, obviously, that the Chargers have a pretty big hole after moving on from Austin Eckler. So I think he's someone that not a lot of people are going to think about too much, being that he's from Troy, being that he was a 6th-round pick. But I really like that fit there just because of the opportunity that he has. And I think he's a runner that can get more than what's blocked for him. And I think that's, of course, more important than any other trait that you can have at the running back spot.
We'll spend a little bit more time talking about the Chargers backfield. Heath, I'll ask you the same thing from a fantasy perspective. Was there somebody on day 3 that ended up in a spot that you're like, wow, I really got to maybe reevaluate this or take a look at this player and say, this guy could be somebody that I'm taking with a mid to late round pick in fantasy that can make an impact in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, it's probably a late round, not a mid pick, but Troy Franklin. Before the combine, I had him as my number 4 wide receiver. The combine did not go well for him at all in a variety of ways. And so I'd kind of dropped him to 7 or 8. And then the draft didn't go so well for him either. But if you're going to fall to day 3 as a wide receiver, being drafted in a place where Jerry Jeudy was just traded away, and oh yeah, they drafted your college quarterback in round 1, I think that probably earns him more chances in Denver over the next 2 years because Bo Nix is there. So the Troy Franklin to Denver thing was probably my favorite.
Wide open opportunity for him because we know Cortland Sutton, at least for this year, should be the number 1 guy. We know Sean Payton, for whatever reason, doesn't love Marvin Mims, or at least appears not to love Marvin Mims based on how he played him last year. They bring in Josh Reynolds. So there's a chance for Troy Franklin to be an impact player right away. And the Broncos did trade up into the 4th round to get him. So we always love those type of situations. So another guy that we'll spend some time talking on. So again, we're covering rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 today. I'm going to ask you guys this question to think about this because Adam typically puts us on the spot. So again, Chris, I'll ask you more from a prospect standpoint and a destination, a winner and a loser, either from today or from the entire NFL draft. We'll talk about this later. Heath, same thing for you from a fantasy perspective. We've talked a lot about this already. For example, like Kyler Murray's a winner because he gets Marvin Harrison. So there's some obvious ones. But if there's another one or another situation that ended up today, and the same thing like a loser, like for me, for example, Jaylen Wright going to the Dolphins. Oh, do I hate that? Because I was hoping he was going to end up in a spot where he could be more or get an opportunity to be a little bit of a feature back. And it doesn't feel like that's going to happen in Miami.
No, and that was the thing that I wondered. Like, you love it because if Jaylen Wright does end up getting the opportunity and he's in that offense, I think he could be an absolute star in that offense. I wondered if it was actually a loser for Achane, just like further confirmation that the Dolphins view him as a 10 to 12 touchback and not somebody that they can give the ball to 40 or 20 times a game.
Oh, it's definitely a loss for Achane, 100%. You know, I mean, especially that, you know, Raheem Mostert coming off a season where he led the NFL or tied Christian McCaffrey in total touchdowns and led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So he's still there. And now they bring in, you know, a impact type of player at the running back position who doesn't need a lot of touches to be successful, kind of like what De'Von Achane was last year. And, it's hard to justify taking De'Von Achane as a top 10 running back, top 24 overall pick, which is what we've seen in the drafts we've done so far. So what I'm going to do here is, you can see all the draft results on our draft tracker on cbssports.com. And I highly encourage you to do that because Chris has spent an absolute amount of time where he told us before we started, he's tired, and I get it, grading all the picks. And it's great. It's a great read because it gives you a quick insight. You could open up, if you click on the actual grades, there's the full draft profile there. It's a great read, great, a ton of information to give you some updates on some of these players. So if you like the team, it's a team you're a fan of, you can read about the player that your team drafted. If you like the player, you're looking for some insight for some fantasy perspective, Chris has got you covered. So check out the grades on cbssports.com. And as you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube, that's what it'll look like on our draft tracker. But I'm going to highlight some of the skill players that were taken in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. We'll start in round 4, and the first pick of round 4. I'm probably going to butcher some of these names, so I apologize. But Ja'Tavion Sanders, the tight end from Texas, goes to Carolina. Chris, what do you think about him as a player and the fit going into Dave Canales' offense?
I think it's a good fit, and certainly there's targets to go around even after drafting Xavier Leggett in the first round, moving up that one spot with the Buffalo Bills to pick a wide receiver. But we know they bring in Deontay Johnson. It's still, like I said, there's so many targets that could go around. Ja'Tavion Sanders is interesting because he was a big-time recruit. He was like the number 1 recruit in the nation at tight end and actually produced pretty well at Texas, but he never quite met that hype. I mean, clearly, being that big of a recruit, playing at Texas, winning a lot of football games, being productive, you would think, oh, he's going to be first, maybe second round pick. He didn't test very well at the combine. He ran a lot slower than people expected. And he kind of has this sleeker frame that you would think he could be maybe like an Isaiah Likely or a Chiga Okonkwo, but he's really not that sudden or compact after the catch. Like a lot of times, first contact brings him to the turf. So I think you see the smoothness at times where he might be able to get open, maybe underneath or at the intermediate level. But Ja'Tavion Sanders isn't really someone that I don't think quite met the hype of how big of a recruit he was, and just in terms of his overall speed to be that fantasy viable tight end even early in his career.
Heath, is this tight end 2 for you in redraft dynasty from a rookie perspective? We know that Ben Sinnott went yesterday to Washington, or excuse me, round 3, I believe it was, to Washington, but on day 2 of the NFL draft to the Commanders. We clearly know that Brock Bowers is going to be tight end 1. Where does Sanders stack up for you?
Sanders, I have right behind Ben Sinnott. So I had kind of tweeted yesterday that Sinnott was the leader in the clubhouse, and there wasn't anything that happened today that put anybody ahead of him for me. But Ja'Tavion Sanders right after him. I think that he's the easiest guy once you get past Bowers that you can show a highlight clip and look at the things he's done and be like, oh man, that guy's going to be good. But that there's a lot of things that happen other than the highlight clip. And so I'm semi-skeptical of all the tight ends besides Bowers in this class. Sanders is 3rd for me.
And Theo Johnson goes at pick 107 to the Giants. We know there's still the potential of Darren Waller retiring, so that's another player to keep an eye on from an opportunity standpoint where he could come in and make some plays. I don't know right away, but certainly down the road. But there's a potential need for the Giants. There was a report yesterday that Darren Waller was going to retire. It seems like that was a little erroneous. So something to just keep an eye on, as he said at an event, I believe yesterday, as a matter of fact, that he is still mulling over the decision. So something to keep an eye on there in terms of fit. But that's another pick to look at here. 107, the Giants taking Theo Johnson. We talked about Troy Franklin going to the Broncos from Oregon, the wide receiver there. So another player to look at. Chris, I want to talk to you about Javon Baker, because prior to the draft, when we did our wide receiver breakdown, you were excited about him with his ability to make plays down the field. I think it was 21.9 yards after the catch that he averaged at UCF. Is this the type of player that's going to help elevate Drake May and maybe could be the wide receiver 1 in this offense? I don't know right away, but maybe down the road.
Well, yeah, I mean, they picked Jalen Polk in the 2nd round. He's more of a kind of move him around. I don't want to say gadget type, but he's better in the slot, and he's just kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. With Javon Baker, I mean, there weren't a ton outside of obviously the premier guys. There weren't a ton of those true X receivers, and that's just the guys that can play on the perimeter. They run a variety of routes, a lot of comebacks, a lot of digs, a lot of post routes, can win with speed, route running ability. They're going to see more press. Javon Baker, to me, I think is kind of the exact type of wide receiver that will work well with Drake May, because we saw even last year with Devontae Walker that he wants to push the football down the field and to average over 20 yards per catch at UCF without being, a burner. He's a mid 4.5 guy. It kind of indicates that he does feel confident and was very successful winning in those jump ball situations. So I think Javon Baker went a lot later than I thought, but former Alabama guy goes to UCF. I think he has a pretty complete skill set, and maybe not instantly, but I could see by midway point of the season or toward the end of the season, we're like, all right, this is the future wide receiver one that the Patriots actually got on the third day of the draft.
Heath, when you look at this Patriots receiving core, I know you have some moderate expectations, at least prior to the draft, with Kendrick Bourne coming back from the ACL tear. He's somebody that you had ranked certainly higher than Dave and I had. And the only reason I know this is because we did the one mock draft where I'd used your rankings and drafted Kendrick Bourne for you. They have Demario Douglas. They draft Polk, as Chris alluded to earlier in the NFL draft, and they bring in, Baker with a new quarterback, really a couple quarterbacks, as they added another one today, which we'll talk about. But how do you view sort of the Patriots pecking order at receiver right now? Like, who's somebody to covet? Who's somebody that you're looking at, maybe late round pick? Is there anything that excites you about this receiving core now?
I think it's interesting because, like, Chris is obviously right. The chances of becoming the number one wide receiver there are higher than most places that a rookie, especially on day 3, could go. The upside of being the number one wide receiver for the Patriots, maybe not quite as good, unless May is enough to change the culture and the offense there. But I'm probably going to be pretty much like who's going last of Baker, Demario Douglas, and Polk. I wouldn't want to make a big bet on any of those guys. And I think Bourne is probably going to see his 80 to 90 targets as well. So you're probably looking at 2 out of the 3 young guys that have a chance to have a real role in this offense. And any of them that are available in the double-digit rounds are probably fine.
They have
another thing that I'll just say on this quickly, just on the situation in New England with the Patriots, it kind of reminds me for Drake May of the type of wide receivers that he had in 2022 at North Carolina, when he had Josh Downs underneath, who caught like 100 passes. That can be your Demario Douglas. And then Antoine Green, who went in the 7th round last year, was this bigger down the field guy. Wasn't particularly fast, but they used him to just get down the field. A lot of vertical route tree stuff. I kind of feel like not necessarily that the Patriots were trying to totally replicate what he had when he really burst onto the scene, but I think Drake May will kind of understand that very early on, that he has the underneath slot weapon and then the down the field guy right away that he can kind of grow with, as they're both, or all 3 of them, are still very young players.
And I know, people will look at the Patriots receiving core and probably say they've failed to develop some young receivers recently. Tyquan Thornton was a guy that they drafted a couple years ago. He struggled. And then we know Demario Douglas, we kept talking about him a lot last year, and he didn't exactly have consistent performances. Remember, the offensive coordinators there were terrible. Mac Jones has been terrible. So hit the reset button, not just on the offense, but also on your opinion of the Patriots. And we'll see how things change there when it comes to this offense in 2024. We're going to take a quick break right now. We come back and go back to round 4 and talk about a lot of running backs who went in this round that could impact fantasy football, maybe this coming season, with some backups and maybe guys pressuring the starter. But we'll take a break right now on FFT.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
All right, so we're back here, and we're looking at round 4 picks of note. Again, skill players that sort of stand out to us that could be difference makers for fantasy in 2024 and maybe beyond. And round 4 saw a lot of running backs come off the board, starting with Jaylen Wright at pick number 120. The Bucs take Bucky Irving, running back from Oregon, at 125. The Eagles take Will Shipley from Clemson at 127. The Bills take Ray Davis from Kentucky at 128. The 49ers take Isaac Guerendo. Am I saying that right?
Guerendo
from Louisville at
Guerendo.
129. And the Jets take the big guy, Braelon Allen from Wisconsin at 134. So, Heath, of those guys, we already talked about Jaylen Wright and the potential impact they'll have on De'Von Achane and obviously Raheem Mostert as well. Which of these other guys is going to impact the player in front of him on the depth chart that worries you the most? I think we lost Heath's audio there.
It seems like you did, but I'm back. Worries you the most is probably Rachaad White.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, just because he was really efficient as a pass catcher and just caught everything they threw at him last year, but he's never delivered a good rushing average. And I don't think a lot of that's necessarily his fault. But if Bucky Irving can show up and just all of a sudden start pumping out 5 yards a pop, then I could see Irving cut into the rushing volume for Rachaad White in a pretty early in the season.
And from a pass catching perspective as well, Chris, right? I mean, he's a good pass catcher coming out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he's someone, I mean, in the pre-draft show that I was on with you guys to talk about running backs, like his elusiveness, even though he did not test very well at all, had like I don't want to say all-time bad workout, but just his testing didn't align with how explosive and how elusive he looks on film. Like his numbers in terms of just making guys miss are through the roof. He kind of feels like could be someone in training camp and preseason that he really turns heads by just throwing him a swing pass and he makes the veteran corner miss and he turns a swing pass into a 7 or 8 yard gain. And then if there is any room between the tackles, he's small enough and shifty enough. And again, was good enough between the tackles at Oregon to kind of make a name for himself early on. And then suddenly Rachaad White isn't as valuable in fantasy, and Bucky Irving's maybe even eating up some of those 2nd and long and 3rd and long targets in the pass game.
Heath, when you look at this group of guys, is there somebody that you say, I want to have this player as a handcuffed either to the guy that you're drafting? So let's say James Cook and Ray Davis, Braelon Allen, obviously for Breece Hall. They actually drafted another running back in round 6, I believe it was, when they took Isaiah Davis from San Diego State. The Jets did. So they're adding to their backfield. Sorry, Israel Abanikanda. But in any event, when you look at these guys that are coming off the board here, Isaac, say his last name again, Chris?
Guerendo,
he could be in the mix for the handcuff to Christian McCaffrey. Is there somebody that you're going to look at once we get to training camp and say, I want to take this player because of potential situation X?
So if we've ruled out Jaylen Wright and we've ruled out Bucky Irving, then I think it's probably Guerendo, just because we know if you can be that guy that fills in for a couple of games in San Francisco, they're going to open up 5-yard holes, and you're probably going to average 4.5 yards per carry and score a touchdown. But it's more of a situational thing. I'm more excited about Wright and Irving than I am the rest of the guys that we're talking about, just as in terms of their skills.
Chris, I know you were, I think, not the biggest Braelon Allen fan, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or you were?
I think I had him as like my running back 7 or 8.
Okay.
I liked him in the right scheme. I just think it's weird with, like you mentioned, they draft another running back. Izzy Abanikanda, I loved last year. He didn't really get to play because of injury. And then obviously Breece Hall. I wish he would have gone maybe again to the Chargers. I feel like you brought that one up, Jamey, pre-draft. Like that would have been a nicer landing spot for him where he could have been that unique type and maybe gotten feature back carries right away. But it's just such a crowded backfield and they're all big bodied running backs. I mean, Breece Hall is certainly the most talented in the whole bunch. But like I mentioned before, Braelon Allen's pass protection could maybe at least get him onto the field early to make some opportunities happen for himself in the pass game or just as that kind of effortlessly powerful runner.
All right, so we'll see what that means for Breece Hall. Again, adding to this backfield. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers likes weapons. Breece Hall probably does not like competition, and we certainly do not like competition for our star running backs. Right now, Breece Hall is going to be in the top 3 of the running back position and a first-round pick in the majority of leagues. I don't think this will change that very much. But again, the Jets adding a running back in round 4. Let's go now to some of the picks in round 5. And the first one that stood out to me was another running back, the Denver Broncos taking Audric Estime. Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
From Notre Dame. Spencer Rattler comes off the board in round 5 as he goes to the Saints. The Ravens take another running back in Rasheen Ali. Tyrone Tracy goes to the Giants from Purdue. Keelan Robinson, another running back from Texas, goes to the Jaguars. The Jets take an interesting pick with Jordan Travis, quarterback from Florida State. We know he's coming back from that devastating injury last season. And again, Isaiah Davis from San Diego State goes to the Jets. So, Chris, in terms of Estime, Broncos have an interesting backfield right now with Javonte Williams, Julian McLaughlin. Right now, Samaje Perine still on the roster. Where do you sort of see Estime fitting into Denver's system, and what do you like about the prospect?
He could be truly, I mean, this sounds like it's a low-hanging fruit, but I think it's just too easy. He could be that goal line guy because he is built like you would expect an old school power runner to be. And with Braelon Allen, there's effortless power. With Estime, I mean, it's another level. Like he truly will almost never go down on first contact and he will fall forward 2 and 3 and 4 yards. not really anyone else on that roster is, I don't think, a stable short yardage guy. I know Piron's a little bigger. Javonte Williams certainly has size as well, but hasn't quite been the same after that devastating injury that he suffered. So I could see Estime, who has a bit more quickness than you would think for this wide body kind of battering ram. I mean, he forced a missed tackle on 31% of his rushes. That was his high watermark. I think this past season, which is right there with Jaylen Wright, who's totally different runner. But if you're just looking at it elusiveness wise, he actually can make guys miss in the hole. He has that 230-pound frame, certainly very powerful from his lower half all the way up to his shoulders. So I think he could be that guy that kind of vultures some touchdowns just because of his build and how productive he was doing that at Notre Dame.
Heath, when you look at this backfield, it's just another guy. We know Sean Payton has used multiple backs throughout his tenure in New Orleans. He did it last year with the Broncos as well. What's the depth chart going to be in your mind? Is Javonte still safe as the lead guy? Because remember, he inherited Javonte Williams. This is a guy that he went out and drafted for the first time. He brought in McLaughlin last year as well. And we know he was very high on Samaje Perine, at least going into the season. So is Javonte Williams in trouble in your mind with this addition?
Listen, I don't think this was a very good running back class. That was our speculation before the draft. And I think most of the actions from the NFL indicate that they agree. And so a 5th round pick at like the 7th or 8th running back off the board, I'm not going to take that as a sign that Javonte Williams is in trouble. I think there's kind of 2 questions that I have, because he did bring in Jaleel McLaughlin last year and he was extremely efficient and actually had some success inside the 10-yard line. Does he still have any role at all? I do think that Javonte Williams is going to be the lead back, but it's not going to be a lead back role that's valuable if we still want Jaleel to touch the ball 8 to 10 times a game, and Estime is going to take short yardage work and touches inside the 5. So I think whether if it's a 2-headed monster and Javonte's in the Alvin Kamara role and Estime is Mark Ingram, then that's perfectly fine. If Jaleel McLaughlin gets involved, then we're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could be tough to see. I'm going to kind of pair these together because we often pair Jaleel McLaughlin and Keaton Mitchell together as sort of these explosive type of guys. And again, the Ravens in the same round 5, select a running back, Rasheen Ali from Marshall. So Heath, I'll start with you just on the same situation. You know, Derrick Henry clearly the lead guy. I know Mitchell was somebody that you talked about as a sleeper when we did our sleeper show earlier this month. How do you view this backfield now shaping up with Justice Hill and Mitchell still there?
They're, like you talked about it, how Chris is going to know these guys better than we do, and we get to a certain level in terms of our position player. This was one that kind of caught me off guard. Not a guy that I was expecting to be super excited about in terms of fantasy football. And so for the time being, until they indicate otherwise, I'm going to kind of anticipate that it's Henry's the hammer and Mitchell's going to be the change of pace guy. And this is not going to have that big of impact, but I'm open to Chris telling me that he's going to take Keaton Mitchell's job.
No, I don't think he will. I mean, I always look at elusiveness numbers just to help me kind of delineate how good these guys are, just making guys miss. Rasheen Ali's missed tackle force rate was only like 23%, which is pretty low. But the thing with him, if you're talking about like that, they have Derrick Henry. They do want that explosiveness. They certainly have that with Keaton Mitchell, and I assume he'll be 100% healthy coming off the ACL tear last year. But Rasheen Ali is big, and when he finds open space, he can really go too. So he's not going to be someone that's going to make defenders miss, but they usually block it up pretty well there in Baltimore. He could be someone that maybe the Ravens kind of view as more of a stable or sturdier player because he does have a bigger frame. But as someone that absolutely loved Keaton Mitchell last year, and it was so fun seeing him go undrafted and then playing really well, averaging over 8 yards a carry before the injury, I still think, like you're mentioning, that it will be Henry as the hammer and then Keaton Mitchell as the change of pace guy to just keep defenses on their heels. I don't think Ali is that talented of a back to, again, take or make more of what's blocked for him. Could he hit a long run every once in a while? Sure. But I still think Keaton Mitchell truly is the more talented back just in terms of being in that niche role opposite Derrick Henry.
And let's be fair, he is coming back from an ACL tear, so who knows when he'll be ready. They have the luxury of taking their time because of Derrick Henry. Yeah. But also they have to start looking to the future because Derrick Henry is 30. And so if this is somebody, look, we know the running back, as Heath alluded to, this draft class was not exactly the sexiest coming into the league. But Kyren Williams was a round 5 pick. We know that it doesn't necessarily mean where the draft, it's not the same. where the draft capital spent on this position isn't necessarily going to dictate how a team views them long term. If they could play, they'll give them the opportunity for a couple of years. And if this is a situation where maybe Ali in 2025 could be a playmaker for them if he comes out playing well in his rookie campaign. Let's see. Where should we go to next? Let's go to the quarterback, because I'm curious Heath's take on this from a dynasty perspective, because you don't really love Derek Carr. We know that.
Right.
Not exactly your favorite guy.
Accurate.
So the Saints go out and get Spencer Rattler, quarterback from South Carolina, in round 5. I think he probably fell maybe a round or two more than some people expected. Is this somebody in dynasty drafts that you'll be looking at and saying, maybe not 2024, maybe not 2025, but if the Saints do decide to move on from Derek Carr at some point, that Rattler could be the quarterback of the future in New Orleans?
So I think that Michael Penix is the maybe not 24, maybe not 25 guy from this
maybe not
class.
26, maybe not 27.
Right. I mean, Spencer Rattler most likely is just the maybe not guy. But I do think if you're going to, it's kind of like I said with Troy Franklin, and it's not as good a spot, and it's a round later. But if you're going to fall further than this, the guy, I wouldn't mind being behind an aging Derek Carr, who looked like at times like he battled to stay healthy last year. And if he got an opportunity in that offense with pretty decent weapons around him, I'm thinking in a super flex league, I'm probably not, like a rookie only draft, I'm probably not taking Rattler until round 3, which is pretty low for a quarterback. So it's low expectations, but it's not a bad landing spot if you're going to fall this far.
And Chris, you're kind of shaking your head when I said, round or two farther than some people expected. Where was Rattler for you? And just talk about the fit, going to the Saints and what he can maybe accomplish there if he ever gets a chance to play.
Yeah, I had him like end of the 3rd, early 4th, so I think that was spot on, or just at least in my estimation. The one thing I'll say that I think could make this intriguing, and this is not to suggest that I think Spencer Rattler is going to like beat out Derek Carr week 1 and play, but we saw last year, and it was great for fantasy, especially if you owned Alvin Kamara or anyone of the Saints backs, Kendre Miller, that there was that long stretch where Derek Carr was like afraid to throw the ball over like 2 yards. Like he just kept checking the ball down over and over and over. Spencer Rattler is the opposite quarterback of that. He will literally off his back foot with the defender in his face, flick it 40 yards down the field because he was a big recruit. And 3 years ago, we were like, oh, he and Sam Howell, they're going to be number 1, number 2 overall, like in the 21 or 22 draft. Ultimately, that never came to fruition, but you see the arm talent from him in the SEC the last 2 years at South Carolina. The offensive line wasn't very great. I mean, he threw to Leggett this past season, which was by far the best wide receiver that he had. But the arm talent, the aggression as a thrower, it could be something where the Saints are, whether it's, like you said, maybe next year, or maybe just at points this year where they're like, man, like it's 3rd and 6. We need not Alex Smith 2.0 here in Derek Carr. We need someone that's willing to make those throws. And Spencer Rattler can't really move around very much. He sometimes makes some bad reads, but the arm talent and just the style of play that they play the quarterback position is drastically different, which maybe gives Rattler a glimmer of hope to eventually unseat Derek Carr, especially as he gets older and a lot more costly for the Saints.
I think you nailed it, Heath, in terms of the draft value for fantasy. 3rd round, super flex type of guy that if you could sit on like a Jordan Love, for example, not the same draft capital NFL wise, but maybe able to be a player at some point. And who knows what the Saints look like when he does get the chance to see the field. I'll stay with the quarterback position in round 5. Jets taking a interesting flyer on Jordan Travis. And Chris, I'll start with you. Where would Travis have been for you if he was 100% healthy? And what do you think about his long-term impact? We know Aaron Rodgers in his 40s may not be playing past 2024. Could he eventually take over as a starter there for the Jets?
Well, what's so ironic is that they have Aaron Rodgers coming off an Achilles and they draft a quarterback that's coming off a late season broken leg. So it's kind of like not necessarily how I would do it if I was drafting.
It's all right, Taylor, to be fair.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. You're right. With Travis, maybe a 3rd or a 4th round pick, maybe he would have gone a round earlier. What I like about him and why I think he still got drafted despite the injury is that he showed improvement as a passer every season in college as he started. Like 3 years ago when he was just kind of a spot starter for Florida State, it was like, all right, he can run around a little, but he's just not a passer. And then the next year you saw better arm strength, more accuracy, more anticipation. Like he understands that he doesn't have a big arm and that he needs to lead receivers or throw away from coverage. And then before the injury late in the season at Florida State, I thought, hey, if a team picks him in the 3rd or 4th round and wants him to eventually be the primary backup and be like a Tyrod Taylor-esque stopgap guy or someone that could play 3 or 4 games while your starter has an ankle injury. He can be that type of player because he is a pretty good athlete. Is he going to run away from, cornerbacks that run 4.3? No, but the improvisation, the spatial awareness that we talked about, with Patrick Mahomes, and maybe Jaden Daniels didn't really have that. You get that with Jordan Travis. Just doesn't have a big time arm. So he's an interesting player to see how he'll translate because a lot of times it felt like, oh, maybe he's just not quite physically capable enough in the ACC. But again, he was just really efficient, completion percentage, accuracy percentage, all of those things as he grew as a quarterback for the Seminoles.
Heath, of the 2 quarterbacks that were taken in this round, Spencer Rattler and Jordan Travis, again, you mentioned 3rd round capital in the Superflex rookie only draft. Which one of these guys would you be taking first?
The very slightest of leans towards Spencer Rattler, but I will go with Rattler over Travis.
I think that's probably the safe way to go, just based on the injury, and who knows what the Jets will look like by the time he's starting. I mean, clearly the same thing for the Saints, but Rattler does seem to have a little bit more upside. But yes, I think both guys round 3 range, depending on how deep your rookie only draft is for Superflex leagues. Not a bad idea to take both these guys. And if you have IR spots, you could stash Travis, probably maybe looking at a redshirt season for his rookie year in the NFL. We'll get back to some running backs here and then we'll take a break. But Tyrone Tracy going to the Giants. Chris, talk to me about him, running back from Purdue. And we know this is a backfield that doesn't have a entrenched starter, I think, that is not having to look over his shoulder. They bring in Devin Singletary to replace Saquon Barkley. Could Tracy, I know round 5 pick again, what this class is, the number running back he was taken in this draft, but is he somebody that can push Devin Singletary in your mind based on the type of prospect that he is?
I do think so, because I think being a guy who ran in the mid 4.4s, he ran 4.48. He has the juice that Devin Singletary doesn't. I think Devin Singletary is a fine back, but that's kind of been the book on him since he was coming out of FAU, that he's just going to be very good laterally, but not down the field. With Tyrone Tracy, you get that. You certainly get receiving capability as a former Iowa wide receiver. And then the fact that even though he's relatively new to the position, the elusiveness in the hole when it's a linebacker waiting for him to the jump cut sideways or to bounce off a tackler or a spin move in the hole. It's almost truly like we always say with wide receivers that, they morph into, a running back once they get the ball in their hands. Tyrone Tracy just gets the handoff and is suddenly feeling like he's already caught the ball and is just good at making defenders miss at the line of scrimmage, beyond, and then at the 3rd level. So I think he could be someone truly, because he has enough athletic talent and has shown so much promise starting off playing running back like so late in his collegiate career. I don't know if he'll necessarily overtake Devin Singletary, but Singletary is not so amazingly talented that he, to me, has a stranglehold on that starting job.
Heath, our new favorite word, and I'll give Ben Gretsch credit for it, the ambiguous backfields. Is this going to be one of those ambiguous backfields for you if Tracy can work his way up to number 2 on the depth chart early in camp, knowing that, again, Singletary, while he's led his team in rushing, I believe Adam Azer has said 5 years in a row between Buffalo and Houston, again, not the biggest of talents, or best of talents, I should say, from a fantasy perspective. So is this one of those backfields you'll be looking at?
Yeah, I think that Chris made a good, yes, Tracy can impact Singletary, but I don't think he'll ever make anything ambiguous. The dirty work, the inside work, and Tracy, if he does impact Singletary, which he might, is going to be doing so with those outside carries or with the passing game work. So if it might turn into more of one of those 1A, 1B situations, but we're pretty certain about what the 2 guys' roles are. It's a weird combination to have a guy who's an older prospect, I think already 24 years old, but also inexperienced as a running back. You can see there's more potential because he hasn't played running back very long, but how much potential is there because he's already 24 years old? Probably not a guy I'm going to be super high on in terms of the dynasty rankings, but he could absolutely prevent Devin Singletary from mattering.
Also, though, you could make a case that Singletary is a winner with this being the selection.
True.
From
Yeah.
the backfield.
For sure.
It's not like they spent a lot of capital to upgrade over Devin Singletary. They brought in somebody that feels like complementary or backup to Singletary, with Tyrone Tracy going pick 166 to the Giants out of Purdue. One more running back that we'll look at from round 5 is Keelan Robinson from Texas. So, Heath, we know that the Jaguars have said, or at least we heard a lot of wanting to take some work off of Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby's still there. They bring back Dearness Johnson. Is this the type of player that is going to make you more nervous about Travis Etienne, or just, okay, maybe this is more of an indication of Bigsby struggling in his rookie campaign and Dearness Johnson just being more of a guy?
Yeah, this type of investment in this specific player makes me think more. Yeah, the Jacksonville might continue to want to take more off of Travis Etienne's plate, but they're going to be in competitive games, and Etienne's going to be the best guy to give the ball to. I think he's a winner, and like maybe somebody develops to a point to where they take as much work as Jacksonville would like, but I think it's really going to be them just kind of gritting their teeth and giving the ball to Etienne more than they want to.
Talk to me about the prospect, Chris, and I'm looking at our YouTube site right now. The player comp, the pro comp is Nyheim Hines. I don't know if that was your comp or not.
Wasn't mine,
is he that type of player? You know, just somebody that's going to be more of a gadget role type of guy, role player type of guy, or is he going to be somebody that could be an impact player for the Jaguars?
I think he's more Hines. Like I don't know if that was Ryan Wilson or Josh Edwards, but that's a really good comparison because this is someone from Alabama where he started to Texas. Only 121 carries in his college career, which usually that's great. But I think there was a reason for that he's smaller. And even though he's under 6 foot and like around 180, 190 pounds, he's not this super sudden, like 4'3" guy who's crazy elusive. It's just, he was blocked for very well and can make a lot of, huge rushing lanes and be that capable swing pass screen guy out of the backfield. He's a good talent. And runs a lot harder than you would expect at that size. He's very unique in that he's smaller, but he's kind of a power back. So I don't ever see him even approaching. I don't even think Tank Bigsby, honestly, in this backfield. It does show that maybe they want, in terms of the pass game, though, to kind of have another player to take some of those touches away outside of the pocket for Travis Etienne. And that's really what they get with Keelan Robinson, who is very much a project. Again, not even having 125 carries across 5 years in college.
Different from what they have in their backfield now, again, with Etienne, Bigsby, and Dearness Johnson on the roster. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to jump back into round 4 and round 5 quickly on some of the wide receivers that I skipped over. I was really looking more at like some situations that stood out that could be impact for a lot of players in fantasy, but I don't want to, overlook some of the receivers that we haven't talked about. We'll cover round 6, a little bit of round 7, get some winners and losers, and also talk about a couple of situations that did not necessarily change that we thought were going to change in Dallas and San Francisco. So stay with us after this break.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
And we're back looking at rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 as the NFL draft has concluded. And we're talking to Heath Cummings and Chris Trapasso. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. Let's go back to round 4. I'm just going to say some names. If somebody jumps out to you, stop me, and we'll spend a couple of seconds on it. Not too much time. But I want to just cover some of the names that we did not touch on from a skill position standpoint. So Devontae Walker from UNC goes to the Ravens. Eric All, tight end from Iowa, goes to the Bengals. A.J. Barner, tight end from Michigan, goes to the Seahawks. Cade Stover, tight end from Ohio State, goes to the Texans. Jared Wiley, tight end from TCU, goes to the Chiefs. Nobody? No, that's not Travis Kelce's.
AJ Barner, I can go back to AJ Barner. That he's someone. I mean, you guys can give the fantasy side of it, but in terms of someone that, of course, we talked about JJ McCarthy. That it was, he wasn't really utilized a lot. It was the run game and the defense that got Michigan to win that title. When AJ Barner was given an opportunity, and their other tight end, Colson Loveland, might be a first or a second round pick next year, AJ Barner made the most of it. And you watch him on film, the separation ability is there. He's got good burst off the line. He's not this big lumbering tight end. He's a good blocker, so that should help him get on the field relatively early. That almost no tight ends are good blockers anymore. But being in that Michigan system, being a little bit bigger, he does have the ability to move people. And he made a couple spectacular grabs at Michigan. So he kind of is that later round tight end that was low volume in college just because of the situation he was in, that I could see. I mean, I guess I can't predict that he'll have a great rapport with Geno Smith, but it wouldn't shock me because he does have the athletic chops and just a very reliable hand tight end to maybe just outplay his draft position.
Just a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. We saw, Jackson Smith
so
and
much.
Jigba struggle last year to get the targets that we were hoping for. And the tight end just hasn't been something that Seattle has done. But again, new offensive coordinator, that could change things. But yes, the prospect, I think, an opportunity is there for him to make some plays right away. And then the last wide receiver that I'll mention, Jacob Cowning from Arizona, goes to the 49ers.
I want to mention him quickly that we talked about earlier, like you obviously want these wide receivers, tight ends, running backs to go to good situations. That's a bummer for me. Like they pick Ricky Pearsall. They don't trade Brandon Ayuk. They don't trade Deebo Samuel. They have Juwan Jennings back. And Jacob Cowing, for a lot of people, I didn't quite feel this way, but I could see glimmers. Felt like Jacob Cowing was maybe the Tank Dell of this class, like similar size, big time separation ability, crazy production in college. And then he lands on, one of the most crowded pass catcher groups in the entire NFL. Now, that's not to say that I don't think Kyle Shanahan will just never feature him, but it would have been one thing had he been picked and Ricky Pearsall wasn't a selection in the first round. But for someone that was just so good at all three levels at Arizona and does have that wiggle that Tank Dell has, I was like kind of bummed that he ultimately landed in San Francisco just because it's too crowded there.
We'll talk about the 49ers in a couple of minutes. But yes, for this year, it could be tough for him. But there may be a situation based on the contracts that they have to give out that Pearsall and Cowning may be replacing Ayuk and Deebo Samuel at some point. And you said a big word there that matters to the 49ers, separation. Separation ability is going to be big in that offense because they create as much separation for their receivers as any team in the league. And a lot of teams have obviously copied that by hiring their offensive coordinators. So we'll see if that matters for Cowning down the road. Round 5, again, just stop me if there's anybody that stands out. So the Colts take Anthony Gold, wide receiver from Oregon State. Aeneas Smith from Texas A&M goes to the Eagles. Jamari Thrash from Louisville goes to the Browns. Bub Means, I think that was on Pete Prisco's Better Than team, goes to the Saints. And I remember Dennis Allen at the owners meeting saying they were going to add a pass catcher. Didn't necessarily mean a wide receiver, but they do add a wide receiver from Pitt in Bub Means. And that's it for rounds 4 and 5. So now we're caught up. Let's get into round 6 here. And again, here are some of the players that stood out. We already talked a little bit about Kimani Vidal, the running back from Troy, going to the Chargers. So Heath, Chris likes him as a prospect. When you look at the guys that they have on their depth chart now, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, does Vidal have a chance to maybe overtake them at some point during the season?
Yeah, I think it's listen, it's a tough ask if Gus Edwards doesn't lose anything because he's 30 years old and J.K. Dobbins becomes who he was before the injury again. But the fact that those two things exist, Edwards' age and Dobbins' injury, really presents a nice opening. And I definitely think that if you're asking me if he finds himself in the RB1 job in a Harbaugh, Greg Roman situation, can he be successful? 100% yes. I think like if something happens with Edwards, if Dobbins doesn't get back to being the guy, if he gets a 4-game stretch where he's just the guy, this rookie, I think he could be very special.
Yep, just someone to keep an eye on. And again, probably more popular for dynasty leagues than he is for redraft leagues, but could be a waiver wire addition that we're talking about during the season. Before we get into Joe Milton going to the Patriots, 2 other running backs in this round that stood out to me. The Texans taking Jawar Jordan, running back from Louisville, at pick number 205. And the Raiders taking Dylan Lobb, Lobby?
I think it's Lobb,
running back from New Hampshire, at pick number 208. Both interesting picks, Chris, because you have Joe Mixon, 27 years old. He was just added via trade from the Bengals. Could be somebody that has an impact this year, but certainly beyond. And we know that they've not been afraid as a franchise to not necessarily spend a lot of capital in the position in the draft and use that particular player when we talk about Dameon Pierce out of Florida. And then the Raiders, they move on from Josh Jacobs. They bring in Alexander Madison. Heath made a very bold call, which at first I was like, I don't think that could happen. Then as I thought about it, I'm like, you're 100% right, Heath, that Zamir White could be among the league leaders in rush attempts this season. And I don't know if this changes that, but there's another body there. So, Chris, you give me the perspective on the prospects. And then, Heath, you talk about these two guys as fantasy assets, Jawar Jordan from Louisville and Dylan Lobb from New Hampshire. One goes to the Texans, one goes to the Raiders.
So with Jordan, he was kind of in a 2-headed backfield with Isaac Guerendo, who went earlier, who was the big-time tester. Jawar Jordan didn't really do it for me on film. I think he's pretty straight line, runs with a lot of power, almost seeks out power at times. So I would be really surprised just based on the talent if he ever overtakes anyone or starts to really eat into Joe Mixon or anyone else there in Houston. Dylan Lobb's interesting. To me, he's the small school Blake Corum. Like if you loved Blake Corum in this class, goes earlier to the Rams. He was the one to target from New Hampshire. And he had a game. I don't have the exact stats in front of me. I was just looking him up. He had like over 200 yards receiving in a game last year where he was kind of like Evan Hull, where they were just throwing him the football over and over. Pretty elusive, tested pretty well. Not going to run away from people. And I don't think Blake Corum is either, but he's someone that just kind of feels like if this was like prime Tom Brady era, and maybe Tom Brady was maybe part of this pick, being part owner now, he would have just been a Patriots pick, a Danny Woodhead type. That's how I really feel about Lobb, that he's a pretty talented runner. Now, of course, the jump in competition will probably take him some time to acclimate, but he's not necessarily a running back you want to see in space if you're a bigger linebacker or a bigger corner, because he does play so low to the ground, was very productive, has good hands. He could kind of be that, if you're an owner of Zamir White, you'd be kind of ticked off that he's catching all these passes. And if you're a Raiders fan, you could be excited about him as just that possession guy out of the backfield.
Yeah, it's funny because Jordan gets picked 4 picks before Lobb, and I'm probably not going to draft Jawar Jordan in any dynasty rookie drafts this year. And I might kind of target Dylan Lobb in round 3 of rookie drafts. One of the things I said a lot about Corum, and I wonder if Chris thinks this is true about Lobb. Like I thought he was the type of running back that an NFL coach is going to like more than the fans do and more than fantasy managers do, because he goes exactly where he's supposed to go and does the right thing. And if like this is one of those situations in Las Vegas where if you're that kind of guy, you could just become the feature back. There's nobody to prevent you from doing that. It's Zamir White's job right now, and I don't think he's going to lose that job in the offseason. But if Dylan Lobb comes out and accepts the challenge of the increase in competition, he could just take the job.
He had 68 catches for 699 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. Now, of course, small school, I get it. He's, not playing against anywhere close to NFL talent. But what I liked about him is that at the combine, his pro day, it's not like he didn't run 4.8 with a 20-inch vertical. Like he has NFL caliber athleticism. And like what Heath just said, I think they're in Las Vegas. They're not necessarily going to say, hey, Zamir White is our godsend. We're not going to let anyone else eat into his touches. I think Dylan Lobb has, again, that just kind of pesky ability to be a good third down back. And even when he can get outside, make a defender miss or two and just outplay his draft position.
It's going to be interesting how camp goes for these guys. But again, 3 running backs in round 6 that stood out. Kimani Vidal going to the Chargers, Jawar Jordan going to the Texans, and Dylan Lobb from New Hampshire going to the Raiders. I'll run through again the round 6 picks skill position wise. Again, if anybody stands out, feel free to stop. The Titans selecting Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver from Tulane. The Dolphins take Malik Washington, wide receiver from Virginia.
Yeah, stop. Go ahead, Heath.
I'll let you go first on Washington. I was just going to say, like, it was funny when you were going through the round 4 and round 5 wide receivers. It's the first time I realized that I might like the round 6 wide receivers more.
Yeah, no, I do. I definitely do. So this is like, it sounds bad that I'm going to admit this, but it definitely happens every year with when you're grading an entire draft that you put, a guy in the 6th round who goes in the 2nd and vice versa. I had a 2nd round grade on Washington. I thought 42.5-inch vertical, 4.5 speed. He was so good at Northwestern, transfers into the ACC, catches over 100 passes, the short but not small kind of Rondale Moore type frame, even a little stockier than Rondale Moore, allows him to just be so good in that kind of Deebo Samuel role, not necessarily being as powerful as Samuel, but he's that type of player. Now, of course, super crowded, and there's only one football to go around there with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all the pieces that they have. They want to run the ball too. But I think out of the slot to just run at a linebacker and explode out of his break and just catch an anticipatory throw from Tua Tagovailoa, I think Malik Washington can be that guy and could, kind of like Dylan Lobb in Las Vegas, earn the respect of his coaches early on by making a few plays because he has the athleticism. And we just saw it on film, him making something out of nothing so often at Northwestern and then Virginia. And he's a plus athlete all the way across the board.
And Tyreek Hill is 30, and who knows when he's going to hang it up. He did talk about, at least last year, that he was going to play a couple of more seasons, but we'll see how things go for him. Still playing at a very high level, but Dolphins doing at least their due diligence to maybe find a wide receiver of the future to pair with Jalen Waddle if, in fact, Tyreek Hill at some point in the near future decides to hang it up. All right, you got Johnny Wilson from Florida State. Go to the Eagles. Go ahead.
That's the next one.
Next one.
Just right after the Washington pick. And I think the first question is, can we get Johnny Wilson to agree to play tight end? But even if we can't, just another exciting prospect, a huge body, 6'7", 237 at wide receiver, if that's where he plays. And like Washington, he lands in a good situation with a good quarterback, a good offense. If he gets the opportunity, he'll have success.
But will he get the opportunity, though? That's the problem. Because
that is the problem.
Both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith for many years.
What I would say about Wilson is, and this is going to sound silly, but there's not, and I'm not sure if this has been updated, but when I checked a few years ago, there had not been any studies done or there have been studies done that say drop rate in college doesn't really necessarily correlate to the NFL. If Johnny Wilson had just had better hands, and there were some just egregious drops on film, like in key moments where there was really no one around him, I think he probably goes 2 rounds higher than this, because at 6'7", like he said, almost 240 pounds, you think, oh, he's probably like sluggish and can't move. He actually has pretty good movement skills. And even despite those drops, I think his drop rate was over 10% last year at Florida State, which is very high. He also made a bunch of like ridiculous, like back shoulder body control grabs where you're like, most tight ends would not make that type of catch in traffic or near the sideline. So if we're looking at him in November, December, if he is maybe transitioning to tight end at that point and he's not dropping the ones where he's wide open, he is that kind of special talent that I think was certainly worth the roll of the dice for the Eagles this late because of his just enormous catch radius, and he could be one of the more athletic tight ends in the league if he makes that switch.
Probably a better move for the team than it is for fantasy because, again, not just those two receivers there, Dallas Goedert's there. Going to be hard for him to get the targets that he needs to make a fantasy impact right away. Casey Washington goes to the Falcons from Illinois. Tajon Palmer from UAB goes to the Cardinals. Tanner McLaughlin, tight end from Arizona, goes to the Bengals. And Jordan Whittington from Texas goes to the Rams. Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State goes to the Cowboys. And then Joe Milton, quarterback from Tennessee, goes to the Patriots. Heath, they drafted Drake May. You know, I don't know if this will end up being a RG3 Kirk Cousins situation at some point down the road, but Patriots adding another quarterback. So I think we'll see Milton not play very much, but an interesting prospect because we know he can run a little bit. So what do you think about him as a dynasty flyer in Superflex leagues?
Yeah, I mean, like if they have a 4th down with 6 seconds left and they're on their own 20, bring Joe Milton in. He can probably get it there. But he's the type of guy, because you mentioned it, he has some athleticism and he can throw the ball a mile, that you would like to get excited about. But landing in the place that just drafted Drake May kind of saps all of that. I don't have any optimism at all now.
Yeah, it's tough to feel excited about it, but you know, you never know. Could have a good preseason. Maybe they make a trade at some point. Maybe the Falcons want another quarterback and they go out and get Joe Milton from the Patriots. I'll run through the guys in round 7 real quick. We don't need to talk about them. Just these are the skill players that were taken in round 7. Brenden Rice, Jerry Rice's son, goes to the Chargers, wide receiver from USC. Jaheim Bell, tight end from Florida State, goes to the Patriots. Devon Vale, am I saying that right, Chris?
I think it's Vele.
Vele from Utah goes to the Broncos. Taj Washington, another receiver the Dolphins take from USC. Pick 241. Michael Pratt, quarterback from Tulane, goes to the Packers. Devin Culp, tight end from Washington, goes to the Buccaneers. And Cornelius Johnson, wide receiver from Michigan, goes to the Chargers with pick 253. All right, we're going to skip winners and losers because I want to spend a little bit more time on these two situations, and then Chris needs to get some sleep. So we're going to wrap this up with these two scenarios here. The first one, and I saw in the chat, somebody said, are we going to talk about the elephant in the room? Yes, we are. You have, I guess there's 3 more things I want to get to. I'll just bring this up real quick. So Brenden Rice, Jerry Rice's son, gets drafted by the Chargers. Frank Gore's son, and it feels like Frank Gore was just playing, but Frank Gore's son goes to a team that he spent some time with, the Buffalo Bills. And we also have Terrell Owens' son, Tariq Owens. Is that right? Tanique or Tariq?
I'm not sure.
I haven't.
He was not a big-time draft prospect.
Tariq Owens, Missouri State wide receiver. He goes to the 49ers. So we have a couple of legacy situations there. So Terrell Owens' son goes to the 49ers. Frank Gore's son goes to the Buffalo Bills. Just, Chris, anything on the three children of some pretty prominent players? Rice's son, Gore's son, Owens' son, going to the teams that they ended up with.
So I think with Brenden Rice, there is a little glimmer of hope that he could be good with Justin Herbert. Now we'll see how much Greg Roman kind of hampers or kind of, doesn't allow Justin Herbert to kind of accentuate all that arm talent that he has, because that's where Brenden Rice wins, like down the football field. He reminds me so much of Gabe Davis when he was coming out of UCF, that he's pretty stiff. He's not going to run intricate routes. He's not going to have burst off the line to win underneath, but the build-up speed is there, and he tracks the football very well. That's what he did at Colorado, and certainly this past season with Caleb Williams. This may sound hot takey. I will not be surprised, and this is coming from a Bills guy too, if Frank Gore is – I'm not going to say he's going to make the team and be better than Ray Davis, but I think it'll be a closer competition than being a fourth-round pick and an undrafted guy normally would be. That Ray Davis did not really do it for me whatsoever in terms of elusiveness. He's big, he's stocky, he can catch passes, but I think Frank Gore gives you more explosiveness, and the Bills clearly have been looking for that this offseason. That's, they've mentioned it. Their coaching staff, Josh Allen, has said, like, we need more explosive plays. I think you can get that more with Frank Gore Jr. than you can with Ray Davis.
And then Heath, in terms of Owens, I think just a fun story. See what happens there. Let's just go right there. 49ers add 3 receivers on draft weekend. So they draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round. They draft the kid from Arizona, Jacob Cowing, right?
Cowing, yep.
And they end up with Terrell Owens' kid. So that not necessarily somebody's going to make an impact. But Brandon Ayuk is still on the roster, Heath. We thought that was going to be something that happened, that they would trade him, or maybe trade Deebo Samuel. So give me your take on the 49ers receiving core now, because I think prior to the draft, we thought, okay, Ayuk's going to stay. Just, he's stripped his social media of all the 49ers stuff, but they'll work it out. Right. He's still there for now. Again, a trade can still happen. But if they go to week 1, Ayuk's there, Deebo's there. Now Pearsall's there, a huge investment with the first-round pick. And Chris told you he likes counting. How are we viewing the top 2 guys, at least, and factor in George Kittle too, because they were being selected as starters. And in the case of Ayuk and Deebo, basically round 3 picks.
I wonder if the 49ers just made a mistake in taking Pearsall before they got one of the trades done, and now they're getting squeezed, because it does seem like they would really want to trade one of these guys, and they've not been able to get it done yet, and they're clearly not going to accept whatever anybody's offering, at least during draft weekend. If and I'm kind of ranking this way right now because it didn't get done during the draft. If Ayuk and Deebo are there, I'm just going to be pretty out on Ricky Pearsall. I don't think he's going to matter if Ayuk, Deebo, and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey are all playing football for the 49ers. He might just be kind of a red shirt guy. And then I still don't think they're going to have the money to pay Ayuk, and he's not going to accept a discount to stay there. So it might be a 1-year thing. We have to wait for Ricky Pearsall, but I don't think he impacts those guys if they all stay.
Let me ask you this, Heath. If a lot of rookie only drafts happen this week, this coming week, because people get excited. We know that. Are we going to get to a situation where Pearsall falls and Ayuk gets traded? Or are we going to get still, okay, Pearsall will get drafted in round 1 because of his round 1 capital. And then we find out in August, the 49ers found magic money because the salary cap doesn't really matter. And they give Brandon Ayuk a contract. Do you see either of those 2 scenarios playing out?
I think the second's more likely than the first. I don't think Pearsall is going to fall. Now, I don't think he's probably going to go round 1 either, at least not in Superflex, maybe in 1 QB. I think he's probably an early round 2 pick for as long as Ayuk and Deebo are there. But I've run into more when I've been sharing my projections and dynasty rankings from this class, more people saying, well, obviously one of Ayuk or Deebo is going to be gone, than people like honestly considering the fact that maybe they won't give up one of the best wide receivers in football for less than they think he's worth.
Chris, in terms of Pearsall, do you like the fit for the 49ers? Did it surprise you that they took him in the first round? How does this all play out for you?
It did surprise me just prospect-wise, because you mentioned about space, and I think the next level to that is the 49ers have always, like in the Kyle Shanahan era, have prioritized yards after the catch with Whether it's Debo, whether it's George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, even Juwan Jennings was so good after the catch with his contact balance and his power at Tennessee. I think that's why they rolled the dice in the 7th round, and he's like their starting slot receiver now. Ricky Pearsall is more of a route salesman who can get open. And that's really where Brandon Ayuk played in that X role on the outside. He's, certainly better and more explosive, I think, and faster than Ricky Pearsall, I think, on the field. But he's not someone that's, playing like Deebo Samuel or like George Kittle after the catch. And it felt like, okay, I don't think any other team, obviously it was the 31st pick, but it felt like this is a team that wanted to draft Ricky Pearsall to just plug him in as a polished route runner to run all the intricate routes that Brandon Ayuk has run the last couple of years as he's kind of grown into, one of the league's best route runners. And they're not going to necessarily ask him to be amazing after the catch. Had they not picked him, I could have seen him going, somewhere in the middle or the late portions of the 2nd round, because he just doesn't really give you that much after the catch. So it was, I think what Heath first said, that they wanted to draft Pearsall and then wanted to trade Ayuk, but then just haven't been able to do it and are getting squeezed. That to me feels like the most likely scenario, just based on the skill set of Ricky Pearsall and how similar it is to Brandon Ayuk.
It's going to be interesting to see if they continue to get offers. But when you get these type of trade rumors, we talked about this, it usually feels like it happens day one of the draft. AJ Brown, for example, when you get the current draft capital that you can use. But San Francisco may be in the market for 2025 picks and beyond if they are still going to move on from Brandon Ayuk. You saw the message that was posted there. I don't know if that's the real Adam Aizer. It could be a fake Adam Aizer, but it says, "What is happening? I just got here." So Adam is not working. It's his wife, his beautiful wife, Allie's birthday today. So wish her a happy birthday. That's why Adam took the day off, and we're talking here without him. Last topic that we'll cover is a big one, and the Dallas Cowboys do not come away with a running back in the NFL draft. So there was the story that came out. It's kind of been an ongoing story of Ezekiel Elliott is going to sign with the Cowboys. Not official yet, but it sounds like that's what's going to happen. That's according to Todd Archer from ESPN. Adam Schefter also reporting that. Rico Dowdle, Royce Freeman, Deuce Vaughn. Heath, who's your favorite Cowboys running back? And we'll put Zeke on the roster.
I'm going to put Zeke on the roster, and I'm going to say that Zeke is my favorite Cowboys running back. They're all in on Ezekiel Elliott, apparently. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's a low-end number 2 running back. Rico Dowdle is going to touch the ball and do some things, but Zeke's going to score probably double-digit touchdowns and catch 40 or 50 passes and be on the field always when they need somebody to pass block. And so I guess he'll be okay. It's bad for the Cowboys. It's great for Zeke.
So what round are we targeting Ezekiel Elliott?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm targeting him ever, but I would settle
not in 2024.
Yes. Round 6, 7.
Okay. It's 2024. We're talking about Ezekiel and the Cowboys. Chris, I don't know if you mocked a running back to the Cowboys at any point. How surprised are you that they did not take a running back at all?
So after the first round Thursday night, they had me do round 2 and round 3 mock. Sent a running back to the Cowboys, I believe, in the 2nd round. Then last night, after the 3rd round was done, do a round 4 mock up until 12:30, 1 o'clock, which is fine. It's part of the job. Was like, why have they not picked a running back yet? Sent them, all those running backs went in the 4th round. I don't remember who I sent to them, but I know that I sent a running back, and I'm thinking they have to pick one. We heard Jerry Jones before the draft gush about the University of Texas running back, Jonathan Brooks, who went like 5 or 6 picks in front of them in the 2nd round. So maybe they did have him as a target, didn't want to trade up. And they did mention, Stephen Jones said they wanted to rebuild the offensive line, and they picked 1, 2, 3 offensive linemen in this draft. So of course we're not getting 2016 or 17 Zeke here, but I do think I'm actually very surprised they didn't pick some running back. But we could be getting just more holes for the likes of Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle because the offensive line did need to be rebuilt, and they added a lot of depth at that position in this draft.
I would not be surprised. The one name that I keep coming back to just because of what the backfield looks like is somebody like Khalil Herbert being
I would like that a lot.
Training camp trade. Not that I think he's getting cut, but 6th round pick, 7th round pick, some conditional type of compensation, someone like that.
What are the chances that Jerry Jones has ever actually heard Khalil Herbert's name? Does he know who Khalil Herbert is? Like, you need to have a big name. We need to get Dalvin Cook in there.
Well, they can certainly bring back a retread type of guy. Dalvin Cook is still out there. I'm trying to think of the other free agents that make Cam Akers, I guess, is still out there. They could, try and get creative and Jerick McKinnon, somebody like that. But I keep going back. Oh, you know what? Adam just posted this one in the chat as well, since apparently he can't work, but he can post. That Miles Sanders is somebody that they may consider, as well, or Chuba Hubbard. Who knows what the Panthers are looking at. So we're glad that Adam is contributing to the chat, but not contributing to the show. But in any event, that'll do it for us. We're gonna let Chris go because he's killed it this weekend, starting Thursday night with the NFL draft. Rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 as day 3 has wrapped up. And again, a lot of fantasy content coming your way starting on Monday. We'll be back with our podcast as we normally do. We'll have some mock drafts coming up. Our rankings will be up on the site, and we'll have you covered as we start to now really dial in to the 2024 season with the NFL draft finally completed. For Chris Trapasso, Heath Cummings, I'm Jamey Eisenberg. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Football Today.